Welcome back, those who are here. We're glad you're here. And thank you for hanging with us for these last 6 weeks. Tonight's the seventh week, I believe. And this is our final night. Next week, like I said, we're going to have the putting it together, and that's more honed for each individual. And we can talk about how we're going to do that since it's going to be, it's going to have to be tailored to each individual. But again, for here, the disclaimer is that we're not giving you specific advice tonight. All that would require knowing a whole lot more about your individual medical concerns. But we are going to give general information, and hopefully, you guys have been understanding what we've been talking about over these last several weeks. And it's starting to make sense. And like I said, hopefully you're starting to incorporate some of these things you've been learning. So let's go ahead and open with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this time. And Lord, as Marianne and I speak, we pray that it will be your words and that you will be glorified and you'll lead us into the truth about how we can take care of ourselves and the fact that the truth is in your word and it's your desire that we be as healthy as possible in this world. And we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So
Is the recording on?
it's on. So this is again blissful living, meaning like a heavenly living through natural remedies. And we talked about what those natural remedies are. Um, and they are the nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest or sleep, and trust in God or and maintaining meaningful human relationships. So this is what we're continuing to look at and hopefully be incorporating all these things because really these things aren't individual. Everything is to be done together for the kind of results that you uh, would get to where it's going to actually start helping to heal. Natural remedy for diseases, right? And we talked about what those diseases are. Specifically, they're lifestyle diseases like heart disease, which is the number one killer in all industrialized countries. Um, Heart disease also can include congestive heart failure, heart attacks, left ventricular hypertrophy, atrial fibrillation, and others. Also for high blood pressure, for type 2 diabetes, atherosclerosis or hardening or blocking of the arteries, lung disease, some cancers, for obesity, for hypercholesterolemia or hyperlipidemia, and for strokes. And what is disease? Well, disease is dis-ease. That means the absence of ease or not being at ease. And that's how you feel when you're got disease, don't you? You don't feel good. So tonight, you can see we're going to specifically talk about the last two, which is rest and trust in God, and along with healthy social relationships. So rest. The Bible says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I already did that. So that was from Matthew 11:28. God thought rest was so important that he gave us a Sabbath rest in the beginning when he created. In 6 days he created, and on the seventh day God rested, didn't he? And he said in Genesis 2, 1 through 3, he said, uh, um, thus the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them were finished. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. So he sanctified it and he rested. It said He rested on the seventh day, and it said, in it he rested. So even God rested, didn't he? But this was really an example for us. And what kind of rest is it? It's to rest with Christ because when God created, and on the sixth day he created Adam and Eve, everything was done when they came to life and saw everything God had created. And that seventh day was the time that God spent with them the entire day. So this was really a blessing to them, and it is a blessing to have rest. And it says here, when you lie down, you will not be afraid. While you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. And that's what we want, sweet sleep. And that's in Proverbs 3:24. So rest is important because it helps our digestive system to rest, it helps our brains to rejuvenate, and it helps our immune system rebuild. Rest is incredibly powerful. It's refreshing and rejuvenating, regenerating, and it rebuilds the body, mind, and soul. It's the key to good health. You know, it was Ben Franklin who wrote, early to bed, early and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I think that goes for women too. And it's true because going to bed early has been shown to lower rates of heart disease, diabetes, and overall lower death rates than those who stay up late and then get up late in the morning or sometimes even in the afternoon. So that's not the good practice. Good practice is to get to bed early and get up early. If you're not getting adequate amounts of sleep in the evening, you'll not get the maximum benefit from your exercise and diet as well. And, you know, if you think, did you know that most large-scale disasters such as Chernobyl and the Exxon Valdez accident, the Three Mile Island incident, all occurred in pre-dawn hours, a time when vigilance is low. And in these devastating man-made tragedies, a lack of sleep and rest was a major factor in these tragedies. Another thing that we need to realize when it comes to rest or sleep is that we have an internal clock, and that internal clock is called the circadian rhythm. And this circadian rhythm is what keeps us in line with the actual time of day, the day and the night. It's a master clock of your body, and it's set by the absence or presence of light. And you can see here in this diagram that light comes into your eyes and it goes to this place called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this is the master clock. So when light enters the eyes and hits this suprachiasmatic nucleus, it tells your brain whether it's day or night. And so sleeping at the appropriate times when it's dark and being awake and when it's light helps your clock to be in rhythm with what's going on at what time of day it is, okay? And there's a chemical called melatonin that at night is released from your pineal gland as this light comes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It is, I'm sorry, when there's no light coming into the suprachiasmatic nucleus, it allows your pineal gland to secrete this melatonin. When it's light and that goes in and goes through the suprachiasmatic nucleus, it tells your body to start secreting cortisol, which is what gets you going in the morning, okay? And also, there is hormone of appetite and satiety that are also stimulated based on the time of day and night. So, a lack of sleep can adversely affect these two important appetite hormones. It will suppress leptin, which helps us feel full, and it will increase ghrelin, that makes us feel hungry. So it's probable that the lack of sleep is contributing to this increased obesity rates in the US, which is now 72% of Americans are overweight or obese. So this can play a factor. And we just went over those hormones and the effects that they have. And this says a good laugh and a long sleep are the best cures for anything. And that's an Irish Proverbs. And I got excited when I saw that it was an Irish proverb because how many Irish proverbs can you find that don't talk about beer? It's the Irish like to drink their beer, so I was excited that I found one that was about sleep. And have you ever heard somebody say, "Hey, I need to get my beauty sleep"? So how are we going to look after you've experienced a good night's sleep? You're going to look beautiful. And that's what we want to do. So scientists have been looking at sleep for quite a long time, but especially in the past 20 to 40 years. So how important is sleep? Well, I told my son when he was in school, high school and in college, I said, son, you need to be not be playing video games at night. I said, I was telling him because we were learning all about how important sleep is. Me and Marianne, and I said to him, I said, Joe, you need to be sleeping at night instead of staying up. And he said, I said, I'm going to share this sleep video with you. And he said, oh, sleep's overrated. And I'll never forget that because I'm like, no, sleep's not overrated, but I guess some people think that. But as I said, sleep allows the digestive system to rest because guess what? The digestive system takes a lot of blood to work as you're digesting your food. And if that's happening, what's happening at night when you're not supposed to be digesting food? Your immune system is supposed to be getting strengthened and fired up and rejuvenated. All the T cells, B cells, all the white blood cells, all those are getting fortified and built up. What else is happening at night? Well, your brain function is revitalizing. It's uh, it's your brain has to process and store information, but it's basically getting prepared again to work during the day. So all these things, your immune system, your brain rejuvenation, all these have to be done. You don't need to be digesting food because it's taking the blood away from those vital important functions. And you know what? Something that a lot of people don't realize, we all have cancer. And here's the thing, our immune system is fighting off cancer on a daily basis. Cancer simply is cells that are wanting to multiply on their own out of control. And that's part of what your immune system does. It goes in there if you have a good immune system and it kills these cells that are trying to multiply. And that's what stops that from cancer from forming. So we have to be careful that we have a good, strong immune system. And the getting adequate sleep also slows the aging process. When I was in insomnia is not getting being able to sleep. And when I was in practice, um, my patients would come in and, they would just be, telling me things and we'd be talking about their concerns. And some of them, I was like going over different things like we are now with all these New Start principles that are remedies for disease. And sometimes I would get to, what's going on in your life. And then I would say to some people, based on clues I was getting from them, are you sleeping at night? And it was sad how many would all of a sudden their whole demeanor would change and they would be like, I don't sleep or I don't sleep much. And they now all of a sudden, since I talked about that, it was a total, they were like distraught, a lot of them. And they would tell me that they couldn't sleep and how it was affecting them and it was detrimental to them and to their health. And it is. And so this is something that a lot of people won't voice. It's almost like people are afraid to tell others that they don't sleep. Well, insomnia is difficulty, can be a difficulty initiating sleep. It can be difficulty maintaining sleep. It can be waking up too early. It can be difficulty occurs despite the opportunity to sleep. In other words, you have the opportunity to sleep, but you just can't sleep. Okay. So now a lot of people, this unable to sleep may have been going on for years and not months. And being sleep deprived is actually can be torture. I remember when we were in Pensacola and we went to a meeting at another church and we put on, we were talking about rest. And a lady raised her hand and said, I don't sleep at all. And we were like, all like, I was thinking, you mean you don't sleep some? And she said, no, I don't sleep at all. And I haven't been able to sleep for years. And then she started weeping in the middle of this meeting. And as she's pouring out her heart to us, and we're all, just so distraught for her as well, another lady says, I don't sleep either. And now we got these two ladies who are both weeping. And I said, this is, something that we need to pray about. And I said, let's pray right now. And we all got around these two ladies and put, our hands on them and prayed for them. Because, if something's troubling you that much, it needs to be addressed because there's a lot of things, there's something that's going on that needs to be addressed with that. And a lot of it is not physical, it's mental and emotional things that are going on. But anyway, we prayed and we prayed earnestly for these ladies and we asked them after we were through to pray to God that they would sleep. In a few sometime later we came back and we saw them and they had smiles on their faces and they thanked us and they said that they had been able to actually sleep. So this is something that we need to realize that goes on with people, many people, and a lot of people won't let on that they're not sleeping. So, um, what are consequences of lack of sleep or not sleeping? Well, of course, fatigue or daytime sleepiness could be inability to concentrate. You could have impairment of your memory. You can't remember things as well. And that, can occur like even young people that are in college that they stay up all night to study for an exam. It's actually worse to do that than to do what you can and go to bed at a reasonable time. You can be prone to errors. We talked about the disasters that were occurred because of people being tired. Irritability. We know that we can be irritable if we haven't slept. We can have a lack of motivation because we're just fatigued and we just aren't motivated to do anything because we just haven't gotten adequate sleep. And we can also therefore create worries about sleep. Like, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to sleep. And the worry that you can't sleep may make it where you don't sleep. So, all these things, a lot of this is psychological, isn't it? When I was in medical school years ago, um, the residents in these these residency programs in their training after medical school would be staying up late and taking care of patients and taking call and not getting sleep. And eventually they found that there was so many errors by doctors that were tired, or doctors in training that were tired, they were causing more problems than they were helping. And so residency programs started in medicine started to be where they could only have the students or the young medical doctors working a certain amount of time per week, and that helped significantly. So what are medical problems caused by, or what are risk factors for medical morbidity with lack of sleep? Studies suggest that losing as much as 3 hours of sleep can decrease the immune function by 50%. So it can, the more medical morbidities can be diabetes, heart disease, weight gain, high blood pressure and stroke, infections, fungal, bacterial, viral, and parasitic infections, cancers, dementia, and Alzheimer's, and accelerate the aging process. We've already mentioned these things, and these are lifestyle diseases, aren't they? So we can see that lack of sleep is another contributing factor to these lifestyle diseases. And there's psychiatric or mind morbidities that come with lack of sleep. And that can be depression with lack of sleep, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, which is a disorder characterized by alternating episodes of depression and mania, and all psychiatric disorders. So this is quite a broad thing that it can affect. So in summary, insomnia is extremely prevalent. There's a high personal and social cost to insomnia. It can increase our medical problems, increase psychological problems. So this thing, insomnia, that we're talking about here, and all these things that I've mentioned, if this were any other label than insomnia, we'd be alarmed and asking, how do we address this problem in our society? So if we have this problem, what are we going to do? And most people, like I said, suffer in silence. They don't tell their doctor, they don't tell their friends or family. They try to handle it on their own. And like these ladies that we talked about that weren't sleeping, they hadn't told anybody until they told us. And a lot of people might turn to over-the-counter medications. They may think that if they drink alcohol, that it might help, or if they go to the doctor and get a prescription drug, or they may just actually not say anything and to continue in a sleep deficit. So, what are some things that we can do to help if we have insomnia, to prevent it or stop the insomnia where we can actually sleep? So, let's look at some things that can be called sleep killers. One of the things, of course, that we have in today's society is electronic devices or televisions. Electronic devices obviously are telephones and computers, things where you're looking at a screen. And these are going to be sleep killers. And we'll talk about specifics about that. Having too much light in your bedroom. Remember, the light comes into it actually comes into your eyes, but a lot of it, well, it goes in through your eyes, and then your body is going to say, if there's light coming in, that it's daytime and you should be awake. Okay, so that's going to kill your sleep because it's your body's saying it's daytime, so I'm still secreting the things that are secreted in the day, and I'm not secreting the things that are supposed to be secreted at night. Okay. Um, it can be, and let me say about the too much light in your bedroom. It doesn't mean that if you close your eyes, that your body's not going to sense the light, because it's been shown in studies that the skin can even be a receptor for light being present. So you don't want to have light in your room. Okay. And we'll talk about specifics in a minute. Um, Bringing your work that you do, or thing that you're working on, if you're retired or something you're working on, if you bring that into your bedroom, the thought and all that, or the work into your bedroom, it's going to be a sleep killer. If you're getting to bed too late, that's going to totally mess up your circadian rhythm, and your hormones are not going to be secreting what they need to at the time they need to for you to get to sleep and be staying asleep. If you're dwelling on problems, that's been a problem for me in the past, is dwelling on problems. And I've had to learn how to deal with that instead of in the bedroom. Those things have to be dealt with before. Drinking caffeine is definitely a sleep killer. Taking even some prescription medications can be sleep killers. There's also a thing called sleep apnea, and it's a disorder characterized by a pause or cessation, stopping of the rhythmic breathing during sleep. This interrupts restful sleep, and it's more common in overweight adults. And there's an increased risk of heart attacks or premature death with sleep apnea. So, this is actually a fairly common medical condition. I had a lot of patients in the VA. And, the VA will give them free CPAP machines, which is what this is here on this man's face. And um, these give continuous positive airway pressure to help prevent you from, being apneic or stop breathing or not getting breath into your lungs. Okay. High blood pressure relates well to sleep apnea. Some people may have high blood pressure and not realize that sleep apnea is what's causing it. Well, the question comes up then, how much sleep do we need? Well, for a normal adult, for adults, even elderly adults, it's 7 to 9 hours a night. And those should be consistent hours. You can't, like a lot of young people will stay up, party or whatever they're doing in college or something, when they first get there because they realize they got freedom for the first time. And they'll stay awake and stay out late, and then they'll sleep like the next day way into the afternoon. But that's not consistent sleep. That's not regenerative sleep, and that's detrimental. We want consistent sleep. And I'm saying that young people in college, but we can do that too ourselves. And again, there's so many hormonal processes that are taking place that need to be synchronized. And so we should be getting to bed by 9, 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock at the latest, for Central Time. Okay. A lot of people on the East Coast, they may get to bed an hour later than us, but basically, you should try to be getting to bed between 8:30 and 10 p.m. And then the most important sleep is from 9 p.m. to 2 in the morning. And if you're not sleeping at those times, or really 8 hours, like I'm saying, your body is not um, getting the processes accomplished it needs to get done. Now, of course, infants, they can sleep up to 16 hours, toddlers, 10 to 12 hours, and young school children, 9 to 11 hours. But for adults, I should not average, for adults, it should be 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. So let's talk about sleep enhancers, or what's called in the sleep world, in the medical sleep world, it's called sleep hygiene. So, what are sleep enhancers or sleep hygiene? Well, going to bed at about the same time every night. Remember, I said consistency, and that's even on the weekends or even on your days off. Okay. You want to be consistent. These, um, you want to have a wind down time as well. So if you want to get to sleep at, say, 9, well, you probably want to be in bed at 8:30, or, getting wound down to go to sleep. If you want to be sleeping by 10, you might need to start winding down by 9 or 9:30. What else? During the day, especially first thing in the morning, get more direct sunlight. You want to get at least 30 minutes of direct sunlight, and the best time to do that is very first thing in the morning when the first sun first comes up, because that's not so high and so hot that it could, burn you, or be too strong, and where you can't even be in the sun for that long. Um, the sunlight first thing in the morning causes you to secrete the hormones like cortisol that let your body know that it's time to wake up. It's also, when the sun goes down, it tells your body that it's time soon to go to bed. Okay. Also, you should have a room that's fairly cool. Uh, our bodies are going to cool down at bedtime. And what is a cool room? That varies and is relative from person to person. So, cool for you. Unfortunately, sometimes that can be a problem in a marriage because one spouse, one is freezing and the other one's hot, or vice versa. So you have to work that out. But for you, you want it to be cool. Another thing is you can take hot showers or a bath before bed. Also, some people do what's called a contrast shower, where you do 3 minutes of warm, or as warm as you can stand, or as hot as you can stand without burning yourself, obviously, and 30 seconds of as cold as you can stand. And you do that 3 cycles, and it actually helps your body. Even though it revs it up at that moment, it will quickly and shortly thereafter, it'll calm down and actually become very sedate. Your body will become sedated. Um, and our bodies are going to start to warm as the daylight approaches to promote waking. Okay. You want to, again, avoid screen time at least 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed. Screen time, obviously, is computers, the TV, e-pads, smartphones. These things emit blue light, and blue light is the most stimulating light to your eyes and to your brain. Uh, and that's definitely going to go through the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's going to block your ability to secrete melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. An alternative to having computer or your phone, looking at your phone before bed, is to have a little nightlight by your bed on the nightstand, turn it on, and read a book that has words on it, not a book from your computer or phone. And it'll help your body to relax. Or listen to some music, some pleasant, peaceful music, um, or have a pleasant conversation with your spouse. When you get drowsy, if you're reading a book or talking with your spouse, say, I'm getting drowsy, or you got the book, just reach over, turn the light out, put the book aside and lay right down to bed. Okay. You want your bedroom to be what's called a sleep sanctuary. Your bedroom is not for a lot of random activities. Your brain will develop this strong neuro association between your bedroom and sleep. So bringing your office work into your bedroom is a major sleep crime. You should not commit that crime. Remember, a sanctuary is a quiet and peaceful place. Okay? So make your bedroom a sanctuary. You want to black out your room. Get blackout curtains. Technically, you shouldn't be able to see your hand a foot or two in front of your face. And remember, the blue light is stimulating. My mother has a blue light in the bathroom at night, and it's like the worst thing you could possibly have. So when we stay overnight there, which she lives at my sister's house, so it's in that bathroom where my mother uses. But it's like when I go into the bathroom, if I have to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, I'm like, I'm wanting to put my hands over that thing because, and I can't take it out because then she'll have a fit. So it's like the worst thing you can do because it stimulates your brain, and now all these things are turning on. Um, so try, if you have night lights, try to have the night light low on the wall and have it be a reddish color because the reddish color is the least stimulating to your brain, okay? Because think about, years ago, if people lived outside, they would have fires and they might leave the fire burning at night. And what color are the embers? They're red, aren't they? And they're low on the ground. But where's the sun? It's high in the sky, isn't it? So you don't want lights high at night, and you don't want night lights up. You want them down in red, low and red, okay? But you want as little light as possible to function if you need to get up and to go to the bathroom. You don't want to fall and hurt yourself. But you want as little light as possible because if you have too much light, if you throw on the light switch and the overhead light comes on, it's going to be hard for you to go back to sleep. And then exercise early in the day. Again, you're fatiguing your body, you're making it work hard. If you do nothing all day and you have no activity, nothing strenuous, no physical activity, your body is like not been, it's like going to be awake because there's nothing that's made it be tired. So that's also brings out the importance of exercise. We need to exercise. We need to do some strenuous activity during the daytime, and earlier the better because if you exercise late, just before bed, it's going to stimulate cortisol, testosterone, growth hormone. Even ladies have some testosterone. These things are going to wake you up instead of let you relax. Okay. And then pray and meditate on God. Um, Memorize scriptures, read the Bible, pray for others' needs. These are things that'll take, I talked about if I was thinking about stuff that was concerning me, but pray for others. It takes your mind off your own problems and helps you to relax. Um, and so if there's something that's troubling you or something that pops into your mind, you might want to get up and do something to something down, or address that thing in a short time and put it behind you so you're not thinking about it. And hopefully, you'll surrender, pray again, and turn things over to God, and don't dwell on things. What if you work the graveyard shift? Because I know people ask this question. Well, as one person said, find a new job. And I think that's self-explanatory because if you're working the night shift, you're basically working yourself to death. And yes, there are times when people have to work the night shift. And usually, though, you will want to do that in a rotational fashion. Medical people, they can rotate with others, but it's definitely causes can cause medical problems. And as we talked about, the circadian rhythm and hormone secretion at the right times of the day, these are all very important for long-term longevity and clearness of mind and physical health. What about napping? Well, if you're going to take a nap, you probably want to nap as early in the day as possible. And it would only be like a power nap, like a 5 to 10 minute nap. I learned to do that in college when I was studying a lot. And I laid my head down on my arm one day and fell asleep for like 5 minutes and woke up, and I felt like I had slept for the whole night. So, in other words, it rejuvenates you. And I can still do that to this day if I get really sleepy, put my head down or whatever, gets in some position. I'm not going into the bed and getting under the covers. That's a totally different thing because that's not going to be a power nap. That's going to be a sleep, and then you're not going to be able to sleep when you're supposed to sleep. Okay, so trust in God and maintaining meaningful human relationships. It says in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, that's God, and he shall direct your paths. See, he's going to do it for you. We don't have to worry. He'll direct our paths. And that takes a lot of stress off of us. In November 2005, National Geographic reported that the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California, had been scientifically documented as the longest living group in the United States. And their unique longevity, they said in this article in National Geographic, was attributed to two principal causes. The first one was that most Adventists eat a plant-based diet, as outlined in Genesis 1:29, which we've gone over a few times. And that's a plant-based diet that's unprocessed plant-based diet or unprocessed plant diet. And the second cause was their longevity and health was the regular practice of rest, worship, and fellowship every seventh day, which I said is also found in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, where we talked about God rested on the seventh day and blessed and sanctified that day, because in it he rested and he gave man rest. And we can fellowship on that day as well. So in Isaiah 26:3, it says, you will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. You is God. You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on God because he trusts in you. And that gives us peace. Talked about family and friends. You know, in Genesis, in the creation week, the first Genesis 1, it talks about how God made all these things each day, and that he said, and it was good, and it was good. And on the sixth day, when he made the land animals and man, he said it was very good. I think it was Genesis 1:20, 1:31. But when we get to Genesis 2:18, he says something was not good. And the thing that he said in Genesis that was not good in Genesis 2:18 was is that man, it was not good that man should be alone. What does that tell us about God's ideal for human relationships? God knows that it's not good, that it's good for us to have trusting in person, live with the person, human relationships. That was the plan from the very beginning, from the beginning of creation. This is the ideal. and it is the most impactful on our mental health. Studies indicate that mental health complications of decreased socialization, and we saw a lot of those impacts during COVID, didn't we? When people were told that they should be isolated from one another. And we know that in the Bible, in Hebrews 10:25, that the Apostle Paul urges us, do not forsake the assembling.
Assembling of the brethren.
Amen. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, John 8:32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And it's increasing in the Lord's anointings to see healing miracles brings great freedom and victory. We want you all to have victory and freedom in Christ and freedom in the truth. And we want this to have been a presentation about the truth about the fact that God desires us to have blissful living for this life. Now we know, as we said, that we're all going to die, but while we're living, we can live a great, abundant life. And that's what God has for us if we follow these New Start principles. So now you know the truth. The truth can make you free from many of these destructive diseases that we've been talking about that besiege many people. So many people have these lifestyle health issues and health challenges that don't need to be, but we need to surrender our will. And sometimes we need to be temperate and not allow ourselves to do the things that we know that have been a problem for us. So again, just briefly, what does the New Start life look like? Well, here's just a few things. To get up early, 4:30 to 6 a.m., spend time with the Lord in prayer, devotions, Bible study, memorize scripture, to trust in God. Really trust in God is the basis for all these things, because if we trust in God, we'll do the other 7 principles. We should have a plant diet with whole food, not processed food. The best for most everybody is 2 meals a day and no eating or snacking between meals, absolutely none. And drink plenty of water between meals. To start the day early in the morning, get up, get out into the sunshine, get in the fresh air, exercise. Work hard in the day, exercise, work hard, get outside, and include the sunlight, air, and exercise. Spend quality time with family, friends throughout the week. Wind down time before bed and retire between 8:30 and 10 p.m. And then, of course, before that, have your bedtime prayer. That is so. Again, I think I may have shown this slide the first day that if you're willing to learn, if you are not willing to learn and don't want to do anything like this lady here, no one can help you. But if you're determined to learn, no one can stop you. And that's a quote from Zig Ziglar, and I think that's a good quote. So we invite you to join us to move forward in utilizing this New Start program. You know, in Revelation 21:4, it talks about when Christ returns, and it says, in I think Revelation 21:4 says, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. There'll be no more pain, no more death, because those things will have passed away. And God will wipe away the tears from our eyes because we will not be crying anymore because we won't have these things. So this is good news. I'm going to, if you have a question, maybe write that. Hopefully you wrote it down. I'm going to have set up Marianne's slides and turn it over to her
And
to,
then if you'll hold your questions until afterwards, then we'll be able to answer that as well as go over for those who are interested in participating and putting it together. We will be having a meeting next week. Let me switch seat with you.
okay. You want my chair?
Yes.
Okay.
I get to sit in the king's chair.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, as I was saying, we can, if we want to, for those interested in the putting it together, we will be meeting next week, same time.
Together means.
We will be meeting on Zoom, and that
Yes.
will be, oh, the putting it together is for those who are interested in practically applying the principles. We will be doing a coaching. It will be more customized for each individual. We will have a conference with you. We will go over certain things. So we will talk some more about that next week as to what that will look like when we will begin. And so I don't want to use up too much more time. Let me go ahead and jump into this. Now, John did cover some of what I'm going to talk about, and this is the practical aspect of rest and how we can help to de-stress, because we know that we live in a very fast-paced world today. And stress, oh, the title of my presentation for those who are on the phone, it's Understanding Stress and the Power of Mindfulness. So as I was saying, we do live in a very fast-paced world today, and stress is something that is common to all human beings, and it affects many aspects of our lives. And so we're just going to look at what stress is, how it affects us, and how we can manage stress so that it does not manage us and destroy us. And so we're just going to look at, we're going to define stress, the signs behind stress, introduction to mindfulness, and the tools for managing stress, the benefits, and practical ways in which we can incorporate better stress management in our lives. So in today's society in which we live, we hear the word stress, stress. I'm stressed. So what really is stress? Stress, by definition, is the body's response to any demand or challenge, and it can be good or it can be bad. Getting married, people get stressed. Well, women get stressed about that. And positive stress is called eustress. Negative stress, of course, it doesn't have the U, it's just same stress. But at the end of the day, we're going to see that eustress can turn into stress and you can still end up with health issues. So stress can be triggered by external events or internal, whatever is going on, our perceptions. It's funny, something may not be real, but it's how we perceive it. And that can trigger a stress response to us. And there are physiological as well as emotion reactions. And these responses help us to cope with what's going on in our world around us. Sources of stress, right? We have physical or mechanical, mental or emotional, environmental, nutritional, and psychological. And the physical or mental stress, this is more for like you see I have here undertraining or overtraining injury. That is more like in exercising for people who exercise a lot. When we did temperance, John talked about those individuals that were so um, intemperate in their exercising, where you saw some injecting, or that runner who is very, very slender. That's overtraining. And also under training too, where you're not doing well enough, you can experience stress because your body is not really reaping the benefits of exercising. Poor posture and lack of sleep, as John just finished discussing. Those are some of the physical or mechanical aspect of stress, sources of stress, I should say. Then there's the mental or emotional, that's from relationships. Again, John just talked about that. marriages, divorce, arguments, or death of a loved one, or fear, negative attitude, jobs, being overcommitted, financial issues. These can contribute to our mental and emotional stress. And there's environmental. It's that we really, in some respects, we have no control over that. Some things we have control over, others we don't. There are toxins, chemicals, pesticides. I'm not going to go down the list, but you get the picture. Alcohol, tobacco, even the air that we breathe. And as I mentioned last week when John talked about the positive benefits of sunlight, if you recall in the we can become intemperate even in being in the sun, right? Where he had shown those young people who were out in the sun, or just individuals who had so much sunning that it was damaging to their skin. Well, too much UV sunlight can also contribute to stress. It's called oxidative stress, and we'll just talk about that in a little bit. Another source of stress can be nutritional, where we're eating junk food, processed food, or on a calorie restricted diet, high sugar, alcohol, caffeine, as John mentioned. So as you can see, there's a little bit of duplication here, totally unintentional because I didn't go over his slides, but these all are sources of stress. And then there's the physiological aspect. There's illnesses, infections, as he talked about earlier. Hormonal imbalances also can be a source of stress. So we can see that it's all around us, right? In this slide, it says physical and psychological effects of stress. This is just a quick snapshot of how stress is affecting us. It's funny, in the US, we are supposedly, from those of us from other countries, the US is the land of golden opportunities, right? But the more affluent we become as a nation, the more stressed we are. You can see the slide tells us that 75% of Americans report physical symptoms such as headache or fatigue. And also 73% experience psychological symptoms like anxiety or depression. And about 48% suffer from sleep disorders related to stress, as John just talked about earlier. But most notably was 75 to 90% of the primary care visits are linked to stress-related concerns. So, when I worked in a primary care office, a majority of our patients were on some form of antidepressant or anti-anxiety meds, along with medications for sleeping. And I can tell you this, 100% of our patients population, they had 2 or more chronic lifestyle-induced chronic diseases. Diabetes was very common, high blood pressure, hypercholesterolemia, or coronary artery disease. So we have these patients, they were stressed about their health and other factors as well. You can hear them, many of the referrals that I did was for mental health counseling or helps. They had financial issues. They talk about that. So it was a vicious cycle. They're stressed about their health. They're stressed about their social condition, and they're stressed about financial challenges. So, people are dealing with all kinds of stress. So I mentioned earlier about oxidative stress and what that is. Well, it's normal, but it's not normal in that it is an imbalance. Oxidative stress is a result of an imbalance of between the production of reactive oxygen species and the body's ability to deal with the harmful effects with antioxidants. So that means we don't have enough antioxidants in our bodies to mitigate the effect of those reactive oxygen species. And what is reactive oxygen species, or ROS? Those are the byproducts from normal cellular activities in the body. Okay, what your cells are doing, that's just a normal byproduct. Now, unfortunately, this is where it comes into play, oxidative stress can damage cells, proteins, and DNAs. And that contribute, as John talked about earlier, to aging and various diseases. It also plays a key role in the development of chronic conditions that we talked about earlier, the lifestyle-induced chronic diseases that I talked about, diabetes, neurodegenerative disorders, and cardiovascular disease. And prolonged, if oxidative stress continued for a long time, it can also impair our immune function. And of course, with an impaired immune system, it increases our vulnerability to infections and also slowing recovery. So what about chronic inflammation? Chronic stress can also increase chronic inflammation. Remember earlier in the slide where I said there was a high percentage of healthcare visits that was due to stress. Well, that is because chronic stress is, of course, increases inflammation in the body, and chronic low-grade inflammation contribute to the development of numerous diseases, which, of course, requires medical intervention. And we all know those diseases: heart disease, stroke, cancer, respiratory disease, asthma, Alzheimer's, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, arthritis and pain. And for older adults, sarcopenia, which John had mentioned, I think it was maybe the
Exercise.
second or third, when we did the exercise. And sarcopenia, if you recall, is a progressive loss of muscle mass, strength, and function. And this is especially common in older adults. So, and persistent inflammation also gradually damages our tissues and organs. And that, of course, results in impaired bodily functions and health complications. And another factor is poor lifestyle habits, which John had talked about already. So I'm not going to go over those again. And chronic inflammation can also increase, you can also add sleep disruption, which John just covered, insomnia. And they call it chronic shortened sleep times may take years to manifest as disease, but it eventually will affect your health. Some of the health consequences John had discussed already: depression, impaired work performance, decreased quality of life. Again, so the science behind stress. So how stress works is when faced with a stressor, the body's sympathetic nervous system activates the fight or flight response. You may have heard of that. I'm sure we all have heard of that. So what it does is it releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that prepares us to react quickly. Your heart rate increases, the blood pressure is released, heart rate and blood pressure increase to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the muscles more efficiently, start breathing more rapidly to take in more oxygen. Your pupils dilate, so you have a more improved vision, and blood flow towards the brain and muscles, and there's reduction in blood flow to non-essential functions like digestion. So glucose and fats are released for energy, and you have more enhanced alertness and awareness of your surroundings. All of this happens in a split second. Isn't that amazing how God has created this body? So then, if stress, as I mentioned earlier, stress can be good and it can be turned bad real quickly, right? We need short-term stress. Short-term stress can be beneficial because it enhances our focus and our performance. When we're in very real danger, let's say then you're walking down the street and, well, I run down the street and we see a dog. The dog is about to attack or possibly could attack. Well, we need all systems at go. Short-term stress kicks in and I'm ready to take off. You're ready to do something to beat that dog down, right? or even at work, working on an important project, you have a tight deadline. Stress is beneficial to boost your creativity and land you that deadline with a great promotion, a great project, and a promotion or a raise. But the problem comes when the stressor is gone and the body remains in that fight or flight state. This is what leads to chronic stress, and which in turn causes serious health issues. Think about what happens to a light bulb that's left on 24/7. What happens? Eventually it burns out, right? And John mentioned cortisol earlier. So cortisol is a hormone and is produced by the adrenal glands. It is primarily released in response to stress. But as John mentioned earlier, we need cortisol. It helps to regulate our metabolism. It also helps to regulate our blood sugar levels and inflammation in the body. It can also mobilize fatty acids into the blood. It increases clotting and stabilizes our mood and emotions. And as we mentioned earlier, it plays a major role in the flight or fight response. The problem, though, is when cortisol remains consistently high. And this is due to undetected stressors or stressors that one cannot omit from one's life. So here we are, you're prepared to flight or fight, whether or not we need to. And as I mentioned earlier, cortisol increases in those states. Our blood sugar and insulin increases, and it drives the fuel to the muscles. But what if you don't need to flee, or fight? The excess cortisol, which is catabolic, it's in the tissues. Catabolic means it breaks down. So the tissues and immunity starts to break down. The excess glucose that was released is stored as fat, and that increases the risk for obesity, insulin resistance, which can cause diabetes, eventually lead to type 2 diabetes and other metabolic problems as well. And it also include a cardiovascular disease risks. So now do we see why it's important to manage stress? In a way, you could say that stress is a silent, slow killer. And that's the reason why we need to learn how to manage our emotions to avoid negative outcomes in the long run. Yeah, I know in most situations, we cannot control the stressor, but we can control our response. And that's where mindfulness comes into play. There are common symptoms of cortisol imbalance. They're physical symptoms, and that includes nervousness or irritability, anxiety, insomnia, high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, sugar cravings, difficulty concentrating, weight gain, typically around the belly or buffalo hump, and muscle breakdown. You can also have low cortisol levels, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit as to how that comes about. And in a situation where there's low cortisol, apathy, fatigue, hypersomnia, where you sleep too much, low blood pressure, low blood sugar, salt cravings, and lightheadedness on rising. So the common health conditions that are associated with an imbalance in our cortisol level includes uh, IBS, hypothyroidism, type 2 diabetes. Do you see these all diabetes keep coming up, right? There's so many things that are that can trigger type 2 diabetes. So when the body's stress response is overly sensitive and releases too much cortisol, even when there is no significant stressors, we start having these health issues. And as I mentioned, some of those conditions just now, over time, if due to prolonged exposure to stress, this can lead to a desensitization of the stress response system. So what that means is your system has become so used to this stress that it no longer responds, it's no longer sensitive to it. So at the end of the day, your cortisol level now starts to decrease. The production of cortisol starts to decrease. And decreased cortisol production can also have a negative health outcome. And some of those negative health outcomes include chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, PTSD, and also depression. So we need to have a balance of cortisol in our system. Chronic stress also affects mental health, immune system function, increases the risk for conditions like heart disease and depression, diabetes, and digestive issues. If you recall, in the second and third presentations on nutrition, where I talked about the leaky gut issues, um, we see here that chronic stress, that's if you recall me saying that stress plays a huge role in our overall health, including our digestion. When I was in massage school, I was training, I was in school full time, working full time, taking care of my mom and my son. And my mom had some issues as well. And I remember we had a break, and I don't even know how it came up, but I was talking to my anatomy and physiology instructor. And he said to me, I told him what was going on. I mentioned that whenever I eat, the moment I eat, I run to the bathroom. It's like everything was just flowing through me. And he looked at me and he said, you know of the research. There is research out there, to use his word, ad nauseum, that shows that no matter how healthy you think you are eating or doing all those other things, if you are stressed, stress will kill you. So you need to manage your stress. I took note and I made a decision that I do need to change some of what I was doing. So stress can really kill you, even if you're doing everything else, as John mentioned at the beginning of this, or close to the beginning, where the whole point of the new start is everything is linked together, that we can't separate it out. So we're going to take a quick look at mindfulness in managing, and it really is just simply identifying effective ways to manage stress. Um, it is the practice of intentionally paying attention to the present moment without judgment, becoming aware and accepting of thoughts and feelings without making any judgment. It's simply acknowledge what is going on at the moment, acknowledge what you're feeling without getting carried away by your feelings, and this, just doing that, taking a step away from the situation, you may not step away physically, but just mentally assess what is going on, acknowledge it, touch base with what you're experiencing emotionally at this moment. That in itself is a tremendous first step in reducing and managing stress. Because oftentimes, if you think about it, when we're stressed, it's because we feel out of control. You cannot control others or even some of what's happening in your life, but you're 100% in control of your response to it. And this is where mindfulness is truly effective, your thoughtful response to stress. So what are the core principles? The key components of mindfulness include focused attention. As Christians, our focus should be on Christ, as John mentioned toward the end. The one who is bigger, Jesus, than our problems. He said, let there be light, and it was done. If we go back and read Genesis 1, from 1 to 31, we find that everything that we see in the natural world was created by God. Simply Him saying, let there be. So He has the power to not only get us through our distress, but He also has the solution. Another technique is breathing. Breathing, such as slow, deep belly breathing, help to calm the mind and regulate the nervous system. and helps the body to relax. And then finally, we want to cultivate an attitude of non-reactivity. Oftentimes, our first response is not the best. Now, I'll admit it myself, that oftentimes someone says or does something to us and we respond in a way we instantly regret. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever happened to. We need to learn to take a deep breath or two, go for a walk, or leave the situation to clear your mind and talk with God. These practices help improve emotional regulation and reduce stress, enable us to better respond to the stressor. So I can hear you right now. You may not saying it, but you're thinking it. Okay, Marianne, all that's well and good. But what about an emergency situation? Like, let's say a car accident, or heaven forbid, a heart attack, or someone verbally attacking me. Well, isn't God everywhere? Send up what I call SOS prayer. And it goes something like this: Father, help. That's it. And expect and look for that help. This is a prayer that He will answer immediately. It may not come in the way you expect it, but it will come. Look for the answer, it's there. You may find that that verbal attack suddenly stop because you're not responding. Why? Because it takes two to argue. You can still call 911 or whatever you need to call for those emergencies, but you won't be so panicky. You can respond rationally and calmly in those situations. So look for mindfulness as a tool for reducing stress. There are practical techniques that you can use to integrate mindfulness in your life. And what does that look like? Well, from a scientific perspective, research shows that mindfulness reduces anxiety, it lowers cortisol levels, it improves moods, and enhances cognitive function. So some of the ways you can integrate mindfulness in your daily routine starts with as simple as eating. Be mindful in your eating. If you remember in part 2 of digestive health, I mentioned that if you're in a rush, it's best not to eat. And this is the reason why, because cortisol levels are on high. You're not situated, you're not ready. Your body is ready for fight or flight. And so the food that you eat is not going to be digested rather at all, because that's not an essential function at that moment. You want to wait that when you're calm so that you can eat. If you eat in a rush, it's just going to sit there in your body and putrefy, basically rot. So all that good food is wasted. Take time to eat. And also too, when you eat in an unhurried fashion, you're better able to, number one, enjoy your meal, make better choice for a meal, and you'll also be able to enjoy your meal. Mindful walking also enhances calmness and clears the mind. Take meditation breaks during the day. When I say meditation, John talked about meditation earlier. That could be prayer, or you may have had time with the Lord in the morning and you're thinking about what you read in the Bible or what He had spoken to you in prayer. We also know, you can build that in your day. Take like a 3 to 5 minutes throughout the day just to spend time with the Lord, to take a break from whatever it is that you find is stressing you at the moment. Spend a few minutes to reflect. The prophet Daniel prayed, and David also prayed 3 times a day. All these practices help to maintain mindfulness and reduce stress consistently. You want to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. Daily find 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for in your life and make it different. Shouldn't be the same thing every day. It's repeating the same thing, but look for the blessings in our lives. This requires mindfulness and creativity, doesn't it? Be thankful you can walk or talk. Be thankful that you have a car, even if it can only get you, certain distances without breaking down. Be grateful for that. Be thankful for family, health, or recovering health in many cases. Be thankful you can breathe air, fresh air. Be thankful for work. Even if your work is stressful, be thankful you have a job and look for the positives at work. Look for the positive in every situation. And then finally, avoid negative thoughts. Negative thoughts have a deleterious effect on the mind and health. You know, it can cause a whole host of mental issues or health issues over time. Even in a bad situation, look for the positives. You know, over 20 years ago, I made a decision that I was going to start looking for the positive in life because I grew up with so much negativity around me. It was literally eating away my stomach, and I still have stomach issues. You know, when I heard others complaining about the rain, I say, but look at how green it is. Look at the green grass. I try to find the positives. Now, I'm not saying I am a Pollyanna, but I've come a long way from how I was. I had learned to think negatively, but I decided to change that paradigm. Solomon writes in Proverbs 15:13, a joyful heart makes a cheerful face, but when the heart is sad, the spirit is broken. And you know, the story is told of a pastor who had a lady in his congregation. She was always positive. She's never said anything negative. And so he figures, I'm pretty sure she's gonna have something negative to say about Satan. So she went and the pastor went to the woman and asked her thoughts on Satan. Without skipping a beat, the lady said, he sure is persistent. So remember, the mind is the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. Control your thoughts, don't let them control you. So we're just going to look at practical strategies. We mentioned earlier, paying attention, strengthening our action, calming the mind, and stress reduction. The mind is stronger than the physical benefit. Solomon writes as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, in Proverbs 23:7. Regular practice of mindful breathing increases oxygen to your brain. So it clears your mind, gives you clearer thinking abilities, and it improves your attention span. Calm the mind by staying in the present. Think about that. Stay in the present. The past is gone. You cannot change it. Anything pertaining to tomorrow or beyond is in the future, and you have no control over that. So avoid imagining future difficulties or problems. Jesus says in Matthew 6:34, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day have enough trouble of its own. And another writer puts it this way, don't borrow tomorrow's troubles for today. So regularly spend time in God's word. That will also calm the mind and give peace. If you're working, as I mentioned earlier, incorporate mindfulness into your daily activities at work. And at home, improves your focus, communication, and emotional resilience. It will also enhance your overall quality of life. So there are some barriers or constraints. You'll think, okay, this ain't gonna work for me. Well, give it a try. Start small. Do it at times that are most beneficial. Say in the morning before your stressful day begins at work or school, maybe 5 minutes at a time, and take 5-minute breaks midday. Wherever you are, take that time to deliberately disconnect from what's going on at the moment and do some deep breathing and pray for whatever you need at the moment, maybe strength, wisdom, or peace. And take some time before bed to reflect on the day before the lesson, before you go to bed, so that you don't take that with you. As John said earlier, you don't want to take it to bed with you. Accept the lessons learned, dismiss the negatives, and plan how to make things better. Then purposefully let the day go and leave tomorrow for tomorrow's agenda. Avoid letting tomorrow's concern rob you of today's peace. And my final is stress is an inevitable part of life. We know that. But mindfulness offers practical ways to manage stress. By embracing mindfulness, we can improve our well-being and cultivate a balanced, peaceful life. Jesus said in John 14, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, give I unto you." And he also tells us that in this world we will have peace, but be of good cheer.
Mm.
He said, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good courage.
For I have overcome the world.
For I have overcome the world. So just make your connection with Christ, and he will give you the strength to overcome.